you everybody for joining. Councilor Rod, I see you're there.
Hello.
Hi. Councilor Majok said he would join us. I'm not sure if he's in the call. However, I'm going to move ahead. So we are talking about the retirement program, the early retirement program. We had some questions we left at the table before. I think we did get answers that sufficed the need to answer those questions point in time. I do have additional things I wanted to bring up. Donna, I think this would probably be you. I know that letters went out to employees to let them know about their eligibility, right? And that you have already conducted some meetings, group meetings, and maybe one-on-ones, not sure if both. And I was wondering if you have a sense of the response from the staff that would be interested. Is there like maybe a guesstimate of the number that of people that would take the program, or maybe a percent? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So right now we've had the meetings that we've had over 50 people attend. We had some people that accepted but didn't attend. And we have meetings scheduled. They're in-person meetings out at DPW for our local 400 workers tomorrow. So with the over 50 that we have so far, and we're looking at 30 so for tomorrow. We're up over, up to around 85 so far.
So 85 people that want to be, that will adopt
that are considering the program, correct. Considering the program.
Okay, so it's been brought to my attention as well that there could be some implications if we started the program in October rather than September, given that, the vote would be at the end of the month. I think our meeting is on the 24th, if I'm not mistaken. Can you tell us a little bit about the implications of that?
So if the dates are changed, we would have to resend out agreements and mail them out to everyone. I think that would inhibit. We're looking to have savings in the second quarter, so that's why we wanted it done in September. We wanted to have a full quarter, October, November, December, of savings. So it would just be it would be more cost associated with that if we were pushing the dates. I know that there has been some concern expressed at the meetings that we've had from members that are wondering about whether council will pass it or not. We had told them that there would be a committee meeting today. And we also said that, the scheduled vote is the 24th, but we did say that we wanted to, we didn't know what would happen after today's committee meeting.
Okay. All right. So then I only have one more question, and it's more of not so much a question, maybe it is. So we've talked all the time about not rehiring the employees that take the retirement program. However, I just wanted to bring this up.
Okay.
If we were to, as a thought, hypothetical, if we were to rehire some of these eligible, people, not eligible, some of the employees that go in the program at a set fee and as part-time, probably would be the way to do that, to help us train the new people that come on board. And if they do, knowing that they will do a great job because they already know their jobs, it would also be an economy to keep some of those employees at a set fee and part-time. Is that something that we would consider?
So I
Or
will say the
is that
agreement,
illogical?
so part of the agreement and part of this program is that employees would not seek employment with the city again. This is something that, um, and there are some legal reasons for that. That, you know, there are clauses in there that would be, if we hired someone back, we would lose those clauses. And particular, it's about the $5,000 payment. I don't know if Frank wants to speak any more to that, but
Sure, I'm happy to, Donna. Frank Kaliba, the city's chief administrative officer. Counselor, this particular program, and it follows the county program, builds in a number of indemnifications when the employee chooses to take it. So by accepting the $5,000 payment, they accept that as consideration for a number of indemnifications that they provide the city. Now, there's varying opinions about this, but on the side of caution, most employment attorneys, including corporation counsel, will tell you that if you bring someone back even part-time, you lose those indemnifications. And so that's one of the major reasons why we chose to put those in there. The second reason, frankly, is we are very concerned with not hiring back as many of these positions as we can. And we want department heads to recognize that this is not just a shirt changing operation, as some of the departments have treated these kinds of programs in the past. So I lose you as an employee, but I bring you back as a contractor, or I put you on Sura or some other way. That's not going to help us. So those are really the two reasons that we chose to put the prohibition on hiring folks back.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Thank you for your answer. Okay, that's all I had. Team, if you have anything you want to bring up.
I'll just say that we held the item at the last meeting because I had a bunch of questions. So I've talked a bunch to Frank and Brad, and Donna's helped a lot. And I feel comfortable with where we are. I would add we're offering this to 209, 210 employees. So there's like a high degree of uncertainty, but I sort of think it helped when I thought of a more simple scenario where what if the city only had 2 employees who were eligible for this, and we offered this retirement incentive to those 2 employees? There's really only 3 potential outcomes that happen that are different than the status quo. So if we had a situation where, and we're saying we're going to hire half back and keep half empty. So if we had 1 employee who we're going to keep, or 1 position we're going to keep and 1 we're going to eliminate, we have to offer it to both. So the 3 scenarios are the person you wanted to keep, the position you want to keep, they accept and the other one rejects, or the opposite, the person you did want to keep accepts and the other one rejects, or they both accept. And I just went through with like basic numbers on that, what would happen to the city savings offering such a program to those 2 employees. And there's 2 scenarios where we save quite a bit of money. The one, we save like 35%, another we save 19%, and then under the bad case where the one that you want to replace retires and the one that you wouldn't replace doesn't retire, costs go up by 15%. So I just think that really simple example highlights how there's the potential for savings and there's the potential not to save. And with all my conversations with people, I think everybody's aware of it. There's definitely uncertainty as to how much we can know before we know who accepts. But Donna and Frank have shared a list with me of all the positions and their plan for what would be replaced and what wouldn't be, and have talked to me about all the sort of like processes or like chokes in place to ensure that we hold the line so that the program actually is effective. And I feel comfortable with all the answers that I've got. And at the end of the day, it's really going to be up to, well, there's the processes, but it ends with the mayor. So the mayor, I think, is also aware that this can help us save money, or it can be done in a way that if we hire back too many people, it won't save us money. So I think there's buy-in across the board to make the tough decisions to do this. I don't think all department heads are going to be happy when they can't hire who they want, but I definitely think the process is there where people will hold the line so that the city as a whole does save money at this time that we really have a financial crisis. So with that said, and I know there's details about the arrangement that also may make it more palatable or less palatable. Well, let's say less palatable for people to accept. And I think that's just rolling with it for now. Everybody's going to have to make an individual choice as to whether this works for them. And we'll just have to see. But I'm comfortable with it. And when we held it, I personally said that if all the questions were answered in a timely manner, that I would be happy to hold a special meeting of the council to move it forward. So I'd make the motion to move the item forward, but I also suggest and have talked to enough people that I think we should hold a special meeting to move it forward. I think on Monday, given the constraints.
So yeah, that's a conversation we've had, you know, before we got to the meeting, and definitely it's something that we are all in agreement and looking forward to do the special meeting. And you know, when we first held the item, also I wanted to add to that we just didn't get legislation in time as well. I mean, legislation came to us while we were at the meeting, so we had no time to review it or even look at it. So on top of that, you know, then, you know, all the questions that came through the discussion, we needed some answer to those. Thank you, team, for that comment. And so I think we feel comfortable with the item. I would like to move it forward. Team, are you okay with that? I think you just said the same thing. Yeah. So is there any more discussion from anyone in particular?
Rita, I'm here.
Oh, hi, Shaw. How are you?
Yeah.
I didn't realize you were, sorry, I didn't see you at the beginning. Sorry, go ahead.
I came in like 3 minutes late. So this question will go to Donna first. So Donna, you I think from Rita's question, you had said that somehow that there is not going to be a part-time allowed on this, or we were going to rehire. Will both the part-time basis and full-time basis be considered the rehiree, or for the people that we are going to have to hire to fill the position?
Oh, so for so people that are hired to fill the position, you know, I think first of all, we're going to analyze whether we're filling the position or not, and senior staff and the department head and our office, along with finance, will be reviewing every opening. The discussion that we had was about whether or not people that take the incentive can be hired back. And part of the agreement is that anyone that takes this incentive will not seek employment with the city. So we would not be rehiring people back.
Right.
As far as whether or not we're filling the positions full-time or part-time, I think that'll be part of the process when we're analyzing whether we're filling it or not.
Can they choose? I'm sorry, Shaw, go ahead.
So with that, I have another question. Have we, to this point, do we know how many vacancies are already, how many vacancies do we currently have across the city?
I don't have an exact number for that. How many we had? I mean, we do have a hiring freeze, so we have had some people leave and not fill those positions, but I don't have an exact number. I could get that for you.
Okay, so I take when people decide to take these incentives, that whatever vacancies they leave would be in addition to whatever is already around?
So whoever takes these, we're going to be evaluating the position itself. I think once we know how many people are accepting and where the holes are, we will be looking at and working with senior staff and the department head to determine how many positions need to be filled, and, well, first of all, if the position needs to be filled and how many. And I'm just going to take sewers for an example. There's an extraordinary amount of people in our sewers division bureau who are eligible for this. And if everyone took that, we wouldn't be able to just leave those unfilled. So those things would be evaluated after the deadline.
Councilor Piniagua, can I ask a question or make an observation?
Absolutely, yes.
I just want to point out that in the past, when we've had retirements, the city has saved a lot of money by bringing some people back part-time. For example, Vinny from Sewers has been retired since 2010. Marty Davis is retired as Deputy Commissioner of Public Works. And if you bring them back, you get their expertise and you don't have to pay towards their pension costs. You don't have to pay towards their health insurance because they received it as a retiree. So there is some savings if you can take what was once a full-time position and put a part-time person in there that retired from the city, not only for their expertise, as Councilor Piniagua says, but you save some costs as well. And it's been a practice that's been followed for years. And I do think it's going to have an impact on how many people take the retirement between the age of 55 and 62 who need some supplemental income before they reach Social Security age.
Could they choose not to receive the $5,000 incentive if they, I mean, based on what you just said, John? So if they choose not to get the $5,000, can we work in some rehiring at a part-time basis with a set fee?
As Frank said, it's a difference of opinion about a legal precedent. I don't really think there's a legal precedent, but I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm just saying to you, they're erring on the side of caution by saying they're not rehiring people. They're not saying it's prohibitive. It's a cautionary position.
So is it Donna, is that a choice then?
It's actually in the agreement that they will not seek employment with the city. So it is part of that agreement. Anyone that is eligible for this incentive is also eligible just to retire without the incentive. And if they retire without the incentive, then they would be eligible to come back.
So then there's the answer right there. Okay. Would they have to come back like we were saying with some restriction of a set fee and part-time, or eligible for anything they would choose?
No, they'd be able to come back. It's a good question, Councilor. They'd be able to come back in any form or manner that the two things they would not receive is the $5,000 or the assurance of the freeze on the health care. But they certainly could preserve their right to be hired again by not taking the incentive and just taking the retirement.
Okay.
Rita, I have one. Now, Donna.
Mm-hmm.
So say for example that 10 years ago I was hired, making $30,000 a year, and because of the living standard that I was making $30,000 a year 10 years ago, coming in, and over the past 10 years, somehow I rose to making $40,000 a year. Made $10,000 over the last 10 years. Because of the living standard, as say we were to hire Rita today. When we hired $30,000 10 years ago, cost of living costs has risen. Would that mean that if we hired Rita today, somehow that we will not be hiring her at the same $30,000 that I was hired 10 years ago? And I'm asking this to say how do we save anything as a city? Consider that what amount of money we hired people 10 years ago is no longer the same. Right? How do we justify that? Because one of the argument is saving here is going to be on salaries. And it seemed to me that the logic that we used 10 years ago that no longer applies 10 years later. Is there a way you can just walk me through that to kind of make some sense to me?
So, and Counselor, there's a lot of, depending on the bargaining unit, it would depend on where someone starts. So 10 years ago, if someone started at 30,000, if they're in the CSEA union, over those 10 years, there has been increases to that starting base salary. So because, you know, cost of living raises and just raises in general. So now, 10 years later, someone that starts at step one is starting at, let's say 40,000, like you say, 40,000 10 years later. But you're at 40,000, you would be at step 4 or step 5 after 10 years. But the entry level person might be coming in at 36,000. So they've gotten those cost of living raises over those 10 years. So now someone that leaves that's been here 10 years is making 40,000. When we bring them in, we're bringing them at the first step and they're making less than someone that's at step 4 or step 5. Does that make sense?
So Counselor, your point is well taken. If it were only the savings from the starting salary, the program probably wouldn't pay for itself or wouldn't be sufficient to go through the effort. It's the vacancies. It's, you know, as Councilor Rudd has pointed out in our conversations over the last couple of weeks, without the vacancies and keeping those positions vacant, the program is not nearly as accretive to the city as we would need it to be.
So if that's the case, then why are we talking about rehiring?
I'm sorry, how many?
So I'm asking.
The one talking about rehiring, he's in the contract. It says when you sign this $5,000, we won't rehire you. So if you wanted to retire and work for the city, you shouldn't sign this paper.
Right.
No, I understand that. I understand that tenet where you know once you leave, you're not coming back. I get. What I'm saying is from the point that Frank just pointed out is that our saving is going to be in vacancies, right? And the point I asked earlier, okay, let's look at the entry salary. We hire back. Let's look at the salary that we are rehiring those positions. And what I'm understanding from Frank, it seems that if that was the point, then we will not be doing this. The saving is in leaving those positions vacant.
The largest part of the savings, yes.
Right. So my point is, if leaving those, so if that's the case, how much vacancy must we maintain to actually have saving? Because assume that 105 people out of the 210 folks.
The target is the financial model is that 50% of those positions. So if 210 are eligible, 105 take it, that 55 would be held vacant. That's the financial model.
So 55 would give us enough threshold to be able to say that we have made enough savings.
Yeah, it's actually it's pretty significant. And I don't think we're going to hit those numbers, but if we did hit those numbers, it would be significant savings. But as long as we keep it at that 50%, the program will be accretive to the city.
At 50%, it works very well, no matter how many accept. If 2 accept, it works a little bit. If 100 accept, it works more. The issue is we don't know who's going to accept. That's what creates the uncertainty. If all the people accept who are the critical positions that we have to replace, it makes it less likely that we'll save much. But as in the conversations with Frank and everybody else, I think everybody understands this and is managing toward that. So there could be a pot of people who choose to retire where it's fairly easy to hold 50% back because we have a plan and it will happen to work out. There could be a group of people who select the program that makes it very hard for us to not hire, to hold the line on the 50% number. But they have at least done in my opinion, set up themselves for due diligence and having a plan for accountability by saying which positions to us they intend to hold vacant that they would need to replace, that they might replace with internal hires that would create another vacancy, which would be another form of savings. And I think there's that plan in place to hold everyone accountable so that we're most likely to have an early retirement program that produces as much savings as possible.
Could I just add something? I've got a few calls on this, and I'm sorry I'm late to the party here, but and not to belabor this point at all. When you mean not to rehire, that means at any position with the city at all, right, Donna? I mean, if some guy who worked in the Parks Department as a deputy commissioner like I did, and I wanted to come back as a 65-year-old lifeguard or 70-year-old lifeguard at Thornton Park, they would say no, right?
That's correct. That's
there
how
are
it's
some
worded.
people that like to come back to cut grass or something like that, or anything like that in the history of certain departments. Like somebody like Vinny Esposito wouldn't be able to come back.
Not if he takes the $5,000.
Right, not if he takes advantage of this program.
Okay.
If part of your retirement plan is to come back and work for the city, you shouldn't sign this arrangement. This isn't the arrangement.
Sometimes, in case of Vinny, sometimes he came back because we needed him to come back as a part-time employee, or like because you're under the limit of $30,000 as far as state retirement goes. So, okay, thank you.
Is there any more discussion? Do we have any questions? I said, Pat, you came late to the party. You have any more questions?
No, it's okay. I've been talking to Councilor Rudd about this quite often.
Okay. Sure.
I just want to add one more point.
Just a silly. I have this little simpler question. Now, Donna, also with Frank, I take to have this saving. Say, assume that we, rehire few people. Now, in the cost of saving, have we also calculated into this saving cost of onboarding and stuff like that? And have we factored that in?
The onboarding costs are not in the financial model. We consider those to be, those aren't really variable costs. They're mostly sunk costs. So there would be some variable costs, obviously, but the vast majority of that would be fixed costs along the way.
But it's still a cost, right?
But there's a small cost. There's a variable cost to recruiting. There's a variable cost to the initial putting somebody on payroll. Those are your two primary variable costs.
But he's saying the majority of the cost of bringing somebody on is actually things we're already paying for, like the salaries of the people who are still working there, who now need to onboard the person with training and stuff. So it's really just a reallocation of the time that we're already paying for.
And fixed costs in human resources and those kinds of things. The variable costs are relatively low. We don't spend a lot of money on recruiting. We probably should spend more. We don't spend a lot of money on recruiting, so.
So now that we're talking about recruiting, there is a process to that, right? It's a 30-day process, from what I understand. Is that correct? To be able to employ somebody in the city? I mean, if we...
Councilor Peniagua, can I comment on this? I think
Yes.
what the counselor is pointing out is that in a CSEA position, you have to post it internally for 30 days in order to see if somebody in the city wants the position before you could possibly hire off of a civil service list or any place else. That's what our agreement with CSEA is. Is that not correct, Donna?
It's not 30 days, but yes, we have to do an internal bid.
So how, is it more than that?
No, it's less than 30 days that we post it. I think it's a 2-week time frame that we post at the bid. But
None of that will be rushed because the whole point is we're trying to hold vacancies for as long as possible. So even positions that we deem to rehire, we're unlikely to rush the posting, the recruiting. All of that will probably be longer than normal because we're trying to achieve the savings of nobody being in the position for some period of time.
So in the case, John, I will use you as an example just because I know your office better. But there's 2 employees in John's office that are eligible for this program. And he would need to be hired right away. Is that not the case across the board then? So you know what I'm trying to say? I mean,
so when there's a vacancy, there is a process that's followed. We have to, if we were going to fill a position, first of all, for CSEA, there's a lot of CSEA positions that are also competitive civil service positions, which means there may or may not be a civil service list, an active civil service list. So we would have to bid the position for CSEA. We'd also have to possibly canvass the civil service list. So when we're canvassing that civil service list, we have to prepare the canvas, send out the letters, and then there is, from that point, you have to have the letters mailed out. It's probably a 2-week turnaround time frame, but we have to at least give 5 business days for people to respond, and then you can set up interviews. But I mean, typically it's probably a 30-day turnaround time. I will say that with the things that we are putting in place, we are intentionally going to be, making sure that we hit a vacancy rating, and so yes, it's 30 days would be a typical turnaround time, but with this program, we're going to be evaluating all of these things before we make a hiring. So
the thing with the clerk's office, as an example, is that the clerk's office is relatively small, and it is also a revenue generating office. So the people are processing payments to some extent. So it may not be it likely is not representative of the 210 that are being offered. So if someone in the clerk's office retired, the track for rehiring may be different than something in a different department where it's not that way. So this is why steps matters, and we have to manage to what comes forward in the future. We don't know who will accept and who won't, but that's why I think it's important that there be a structure for accountability to be monitoring the bigger picture throughout, which I now feel is in place. And there will also be positions that do need to be rehired because they truly meet that need, and the city might lose more money not filling them. But that's where the management, I think, is pretty aware and is aware of where the hard choices are. But even then, there could be delays in certain things. It all depends on the pool of who accepts and how much work it is to manage it so that we actually save.
Thank you.
Could I just interject just a whole wrench into this or anything like that, but should we consider a provision for a waiver where certain department heads would come to the council and say, we need a waiver to rehire for this position at a part-time level or something like that? I don't know. I don't want.
It's really up to the mayor. I think the mayor and his staff have flexibility, but there's nothing in the law that we're writing that says they can't hire people. That's part of the reason why I've been concerned that we would hire back too many depending on who accepted. But I think everybody understands that we're doing this to save money. So if we hire back too many, so that we have a plan in place to do that, but it's still at the judgment of the mayor and his staff. So it's not like we have tied their hands in some magical way. I mean, I've tried to tie their hands by having them share the plan with us to hold them accountable for why it's likely to make money. But in reality, they still have the judgment to hire or not hire. They just know that if they hire too much, we won't save any money via this program. Which means they're going to have to lay off other people somewhere else, which is also undesirable. So
I understand that, Councilor Rudd, and I appreciate that. But I just was wondering, since this is a collaborative process, maybe if there was some sort of provisional thing to allow the council to have some input, some sort of waiver situation.
So, Councilor, I mean, I think to Councilor Rudd's point, I'm reluctant to say this, but I will. If in case was strongly made that the city would be harmed by continuing to enforce that provision in the retirement plan, we could lift that. I mean, we could say to somebody, repay the $5,000 or give up the freeze on your retiree health insurance benefits. But yes, because it's a contract and not a law, we would always have the right, and as would the other party, the right to petition for a change in the enforcement of any particular clause.
That's great, Frank. I'm thinking more of the city, to tell you the truth, because I can think of at least 6 or 7 instances where the city actually prevailed upon somebody to come back on strictly like that part-time basis under $30,000 state retirement limit, which is I think $30,000 now, to aid the city because of their expertise. So, like I said, I want us make sure we have significant savings from this, but in certain instances, I don't want us to be in a box, to say, as far as personnel goes. One is Mr. Esposito, as a matter of fact. So that's my point. But if the mayor has the flexibility to do that.
Well, I think the flexibility is that the managers could flag the individual, or the individual could kind of flag themselves as, hey, I think I'm a candidate to be coming back to work and save the city money. And then they wouldn't be eligible for this retirement incentive. They could still retire.
Yeah,
and
right.
They could know that they're going to work, but they're not going to get $5,000. Is the $5,000 really going to? I don't know. I don't know how many people.
I don't think the $5,000 will matter
because of the $5,000, but that's debatable on its own.
Yeah.
What about, is this all we're figuring in? I'm assuming we're figuring in all the vacation time, all the comp time, all the sick time, and all that, as far as being paid out. That's, of course, will cut into any kind of savings the city will realize, right? Correct, Donna?
Correct. There, everyone has a limit on how much can be paid out, but
yeah. But you have no idea until we get actually the people.
Exactly.
well, correct.
So.
Correct.
Well, that would increase our short-term costs, I suppose, but it also is a liability that we have to pay sooner or later, regardless. So
right, exactly. It's a lot easier than doing it all at once, obviously. So,
which, as Commissioner O'Connor has been quick to tell us every time as we've been putting together the contingency financial plans, those liabilities have already been incurred and booked, and we're just making good on them. Every time we think we find some savings, Commissioner O'Connor tells us why that isn't a real savings and we have to look elsewhere.
Also, Peniagua,
he's been a real killjoy through this whole thing.
Councilor Peniagua, can I make another observation?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
In addition to what Councilor Majoka was pointing out, because we are self-insured as health insurance for people under 65, when the older employees leave and newer employees are brought on, you're going to have a savings in health insurance costs generally, because younger people need less health coverage. And there also is a huge pension savings, because people in my tier or that have been here a long time, our pensions are much more expensive than a brand new hire's pension will be. So in addition to vacancies and others, there are definitely soft costs or fringe benefit costs that are going to be reduced significantly even when you rehire positions. Is that not correct, Frank?
You're absolutely correct, Clark. We did not figure those into the model because they were so uncertain, but theoretically, you're absolutely right. We should accrue those. We expected Councilor Rudd to not be comfortable with those numbers, so we didn't put them in the model. Because they're pretty speculative, but I think you're right. I think we will achieve some of those things.
Just one thing I thought, and I forgot, and I thought again, but what is it, Bobby Bonilla Day? Anybody ever heard of that? It's like every March something, I don't know. Like Bobby Bonilla signed a contract with the Mets or somebody when
He's going to be playing outfield for the Mets until he's my age.
Yeah, he basically
play outfield.
He basically took like a deferred comp thing where the Met, whoever pays him like every year $1 million, because he was supposed to get paid $20 million at that time, but he put it so that it was later in his life when he wouldn't have any other income. So he actually gets way more money from it because he doesn't have to, he's not earning $20 million in 1 year. He's earning $1 million a year over 20 years. So his tax rate's way lower. But given that we have this cash, we're managing our cash flow, and it might even be good for employees. Like, is there a option that we could put in that the $5,000, if the employee so chose, would get paid out in the next calendar year so that their tax burden would be lower? And then it lets us hold on to the cash for an extra 3 or 4 months. Is there a way to do that?
I don't know the answer to that. I would defer to Corporation Counsel and the Commissioner of Finance as to whether we can accomplish what we need to accomplish and defer that.
I will just interject there and say that we have had some employees that have asked about taking that money and putting it into deferred compensation. So that is something that, you know, some employees will be doing, and is actually a good thing because you save the taxes on that. So
is that the same thing as I just said? It goes in and pays out the next year. How does that work?
It's the same thing you just said, except instead of taking a check next year, the $5,000 is sitting in your deferred account with the state.
correct.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's good. It sounds like that works for people. Maybe just let.
You're deferring it for more than a year. You're deferring it for probably, if you're 55 and do that, you're deferring it until 57 and a half without penalty, 59.
I mean, I guess the only part is that then we're giving the state the benefit of holding the money instead of us. But yeah, sure.
Okay. Well, is there any more discussion? Okay, I think we're ready to move this item forward. The one question at the table that Councilor brought up was about the special meeting. Is this something, Donna, that you still want to request, or are you okay with us doing this on our regular scheduled time?
I would love to see a special meeting and have it voted on sooner rather than later to eliminate any uncertainty for the eligible employees that are considering it.
John, is that something we can put together?
If that's the will of this committee, I will talk to the council president. She can write a letter requesting a special meeting. And as Councilor Rudd said, Monday is probably the earliest, given the notification requirements, that we could do it. Is there any time in particular you want me to request for the council president to make the request?
Donna?
We may have to touch base with the entirety of the council, but yeah, I think we'll just have to take a informal survey to see what time.
Okay, well, so as soon as you have a time that needs to be put in the letter, the time and date, and then I can have the letter.
Rita,
I'll
and
reach
Paul,
out to
what
Councilor
are your
Hudson.
time on Monday? Is there a time that works or doesn't work for the two of you? And Councilor Hogan as well, since you're here.
I'm sorry, can you ask that again? I didn't hear you.
Is there any time that doesn't work for the people who are, what's a good time for the people who are on the call right now? We could ask right now.
Hold on, give me 1 second. If we're talking about Monday at noontime, when I'm good.
You're saying afternoon
Yes.
or?
I'm good at from 12 o'clock on. If are you available?
Yeah, I'll make it happen whatever time.
Yeah, myself too.
Okay.
Okay, given the consensus, should I ask the president for noon on Monday?
Yes, yes, please.
Okay, I will talk to her and make that happen.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, and then there was one more thing that I think we needed to bring up for today before we leave the call, and it's the employee assistance program with Help People. That's a 1 year, not to exceed $40,000. We have a 28 years track record of providing consultation counseling services for city employees, right?
Yes. Yes.
Go ahead, Donna.
I was just going to say our EAP program has been with Crouse Help People for many years. We have many employees that take advantage of that. They do our supervisory trainings, and we've used them for many things. And we're just asking for the 1 year extension to be approved.
Are there any questions about this?
I'm fine moving it forward. I just say it's still subject to us spending, so it's subject to potential hold if we don't get a sufficient plan, but I think we'll get a sufficient plan. Assuming it's within the plan, then okay.
Councilor Majok? Any?
No.
No. Councilor Hogan?
No, I agree with Councilor Rudd.
Okay, so then this item is ready to move forward as well. So if there's nothing else, this will conclude our meeting. So thank you for joining, and we'll see you on our next meeting. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rita.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.